Hey, and welcome to today's podcast and content. And we're going to be talking about how to do better and to speak better in an impromptu scenario. So we're going to go through Peter, Rahul, myself, Chaz. We're here today to bring to you how you can do a great job with this. So we'll go ahead and start going through this. And let's first define the impromptu situation. What is this situation? Is it casual conversation? Is it at the end of a meeting where you need to think quick on your feet? Is this every day? How can we really put this in a structure for impromptu? Anyone can take that.
Sure. So we define impromptu anytime you have to speak while not prepared. So it could be you're in a meeting and they ask you a question. It could be in a meeting and you say something and somebody objects to whatever you're saying, so you have to respond to them. It could be you're walking down the hallway back pre-COVID time and somebody brings you in a room and says, "Can you give us an update?" It could be you are sitting in a virtual meeting and somebody calls your name, Chaz, what do you think about this? And they put you on the spot. Those are impromptu situations. Other impromptu situations where like you're in a media interview, sitting in a panel, you just did your presentation and you're doing the Q&A after. How do you respond to those kind of things?
That's great. That's great. Thank you for that, Peter. And what is a good way that they can think about these situations going into them to make sure they are prepared? Because one of the things about these situations is they can come at any moment. So how can someone stay prepared for something like that that could come at any moment, any point in time? Rahul.
One important thing first is that good impromptu speakers are actually prepared. So when people see someone on a panel and they have really good responses and things like that, they've likely said those things in some way before. Or when you listen to a podcast guest and you go, wow, like that was a really good response. That was a hard question. But then you go listen to some other podcast that they're on and they're saying something slightly similar, just in a little bit different way. So they're building what we call your seeds. And we work on that in messaging. Your seeds you can think of them as your talking points, so to speak. So if you're a designer and you're working on a certain project, you want to build those talking points in the back of your mind. Like, okay, why are we doing this project? What are the benefits of doing this project? What are some of the approaches that we've taken for this design? Things like that. So you want to have those in your back of your mind so that you're not completely caught off guard. So that's the first part, is there is an element of preparation. The second part of it is that there are different muscles that you can build in impromptu so that when you're in the moment, those muscles can fire quickly. It's like a fast twitch muscle that you have available to you. So one of those muscles is your ability to stay open. So open in terms of your face, literally your face. Like, do you show it in your face that you're freaking out a little bit? That happens all the time. You get asked a question in front of a group and people's eyes get buggy or they kind of start looking around, right? So can you stay relaxed? Can you stay open to the situation? There's two others also, commitment and your creativity in that moment. And all of those different muscle groups are things that you can work on, and that's what we teach in our classes.
That's great. And I think that's a key element too of that openness and not collapsing under the pressure that is coming on you. So if habitually, and that may not even realize this, may not even have the awareness that maybe they are collapsing in or looking around or having scrunched face or these immediate reactions, how can someone bring more awareness to even what these reactions are, just to know what they're doing? Because in the moment, they may not necessarily put themselves in that type of position so that they can practice this. So in the moment, how can they be aware of that? And then what can they do to shift it a little bit?
Well, I'm biased. I'm a public speaking trainer. So, one obvious thing is that you have to have outside feedback in some way. Is that you're going to notice a lot of times people, one thing you can do if you don't have any external feedback is you videotape yourself and see what kind of patterns do you have when you're on the spot. Like, try to answer a question immediately. You'll notice you'll do certain things. You might like shift around in your weight, or you might, look off to the side for a really long time, or keep looking up, things like that. So you'll have that. Of course, external feedback is going to be very important to be able to figure out, okay, what are the habits that I do when I'm under pressure?
That's want to add something to this. That's
Yeah,
one of the
please.
advantages of being on virtual is sometimes you get to see yourself in the screen. So let's say, Chaz, you ask me a question and I freeze up, right? And I notice myself. That's immediate feedback. And the best thing to do in those moments is not to beat yourself up. Some people just beat themselves up and they go, I screwed up. And they start emailing people afterwards. Sorry, how was it? Did I do well? Don't do that. Don't freak out. It's natural. If you act like this, tense, and you scrunch your face and you act surprised, just notice it and just relax it. Just like in meditation. Okay? And get used to being quiet for a little bit. And then that gives you time to think. And that puts you on a positive cycle. And if you follow Rahul's advice and you take coaching or you take courses and you participate in classes outside of work, then you get more practice and you'll get better and better and better. And that's the goal. And it's not your job as a professional, as a technical professional, to be so polished like a TV anchor. That's not your job. Actually, people will not take you seriously if you're that polished. Your job is just to be composed, to be authentic, to communicate your ideas and get them across. That's it.
That's great. So if they make some mistakes, be easy on themselves.
Be super easy.
Super
easy. Because here's what's going to happen. If you become hard on yourself, now memory works with emotion. If you're hard on yourself when you make a mistake, then that memory of you acting like this and with the bug eyes, right? It's going to get imprinted even harder. And it's going to be harder to change in the future. And it's going to keep happening. And then every time it happens, you're going to have negative emotional reaction to it, and it's going to stick even more. However, when you relax and you let it go, then you have control and you can change it.
That's good. That's good. Have the forgiveness with yourself like you would a friend. That was one thing that I always remember hearing that stuck out of my mind was that would you talk to a friend like you talk to yourself? You're more forgiving, more nice. So I think that's great. And then let's look at some mistakes. So what are some common mistakes people can make when they are in these impromptu situations, whether it's how they're thinking, whether it's how it comes out, the scrunched face? What are some other mistakes that people do that may help them realize this?
Well, I can hit that one. So there's two big ones that people do. One is compulsively answering the question. So sometimes in an impromptu situation, you've probably even seen that the person barely even finishes their question and the person is already answering. So it's like, yeah, why do you think that we hit it this square? Well, I think blah, 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 blah. They like go right into it. So that's one, is being very compulsive, zero pausing. The other is trying to give too much. And that's a sign of overcompensating, that you don't really know. You're out of your depth, or you went too quickly into the answer and you didn't really think about it at all. So that's another mistake, is you start rambling, going all over the place, and adding too much information. And then the last one is the one-liner, the curt response, which is Peter asks me a question and I go, yep, nope, yeah, that's good, I agree. Right, and nothing else to say, and these all feed into each other because maybe I said it too quickly. I didn't give myself a chance to pause. So these are all symptoms of one larger thing, which is you trying to look a certain way. You're trying to come off, like Peter said, you're trying to come off like too polished or too like you have all the answers or something like that. In fact, in the impromptu boot camp once, one of the students said, "Oh, with this, we're teaching them a certain framework of how do you answer a hard question." And he said, "Oh, like, I don't want to be the know-it-all though. Like at work, I don't want to always have some clever redirection or something like that." And I said, "Yeah, that's why as part of this framework, you say, I don't know about that particular piece." There's nothing wrong with saying that. Now, of course, if it's your project, you probably shouldn't be saying that. You should go do your homework. But if it's something a little bit outside of your domain, or maybe it's, Chaz, you're the expert on that, that's totally fine to say like, oh, I don't know about this particular piece of information. I can tell you about this piece. So you're not trying to be a know-it-all and have all the answers. That's I think for me is the larger theme when you get into trouble with an impromptu situation.
That's really good. And to not be a know-it-all and to say, hey, I don't know, but let me look into that for you. Great way to handle it. So, and Peter, I want to flip this to you. Where did you notice in yourself these impromptu situations, and what were some strategies that you personally did to get stronger in these areas?
For podcast interviews, for when I started my career in training, people would ask me things outside my comfort zone and outside my competence level. I started teaching classes on conflict management and negotiation skills, and I came from an engineering background. So initially, I was a newbie to this field, and people would ask me weird questions. And because I didn't want to sound like I didn't know my stuff, I would make up things. I would try to answer them and outside my comfort zone. And it felt always like I'm reaching outside. And I always felt like I am out of balance. And that's when I realized like I need to do something about this, because I can't be like doing this in every single scenario. So I did a few things. One is I increased my depth and knowledge and experience in the fields I was teaching. And second is I started prepping, like Rahul said. Like it's rare that you will find somebody who can stitch something on the spot and it sounds great. It's rare, super rare. I've been doing public speaking and training for 15 years. I haven't met anybody like that yet, but I'm sure there's somebody out there that exists. So what you need to do, just like most professionals, is spend time and walk through mentally through your material. If it's a project, walk through the project, walk through the timelines, walk through the milestones, walk through the obstacles, walk through the technology mentally. If you want to be, if for example, one of our clients wants to be an authority figure, a thought leader in AI for sensors. So of course, now she has to study sensors. She has to study AI at a deeper level, better than most people. And then also formulate ideas around that, so they're ready, swirling in her head. So when somebody asks a question, she's already formulated that and just comes out with minor tweaks and tailoring. So to me, impromptu situations are tailoring situations, where you take something that you already thought about and formulate it and you tailor it for the situation. That's when you're really successful.
That's really good. And having that thought out before, prepped at the front of your mind, it kind of reminds me of a computer, right? It's you have all this information on your hard drive, but you want to bring out some pieces to your RAM. That way it's just ready to use a lot quicker right there for the
That's
user.
great.
I like it. So that makes a lot of sense of thinking through a little bit of those key points that would matter in those situations so you are prepared. So another thing that I heard from a client today was that she wanted to answer questions at the end of her presentation. And there were some questions she could answer, but then other questions that she really couldn't answer. So how can someone not sound defensive? In terms of her question was, how do I not sound defensive when I'm answering some of these questions that I can't answer? Rahul.
I don't know. So there's a lot of things, to not sound defensive. Of course, one is your mindset. So not taking, if you're defensive, that means at some level you're taking it personally. So you're taking it as, oh, they're attacking me. They don't like who I am as a person, things like that. And okay, maybe it's partially true if you have some issues in politics in the workplace. Maybe most of the time we've seen is that you don't need, it's not about you, it's about the ideas that they're talking about. So you want to respond at an idea level. So you say, okay, this was my thinking behind why I did that. Could you elaborate a little bit more? So that's one area that you can work on, is being able to speak at an idea level. And then the second piece that you want to work on is when you are responding back, maybe seek to clarify and understand first. That's one of, if anyone's read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, seeking to understand first. So a lot of the time you might be defending something where you don't even really understand what they're talking about, or you're not totally clear. And maybe it's on them to clarify first, and then you can respond in a better way. So you can think of that as buying time. I think of it more as you're clarifying and making sure you're responding in the right way. They actually do this in interviews, consulting interviews and things like that. They're looking to see, are you going to ask them questions first about the problem? Because if you jump into the solution, it's going to count against you. So that's something to keep in mind.
That's a great point, is get an understanding first, because what if you think you hear something and then you explain something that is not really what they were asking, and you go on for a couple minutes with it. So ask a follow-up question. You do buy yourself a little bit of time, and also you come off as not as defensive once you separate yourself from the idea.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. I hope you got a lot out of this as the listener, and remember to be prepared before going into these impromptu situations. Have at the forefront of your mind some of your key talking points. We'll see you next time.